It's really kind of you both to invite me here this evening and to indulge my lateness. I apologise for that. There's a simple lesson in Liberal Democrat circles: always take public transport rather than private transport, and you'll not go too far wrong. The opportunity to participate in a debate where Andrew Duff is the opening speaker is one that is approached with some temerity, I should say, on behalf of other colleagues in the parliamentary party, and William Wallace sitting in the front row here. I think this will extend between the Commons and the Lords. Andrew is so prolific as an author and as a thinker. I recall when I was Ming's deputy as Foreign Affairs spokesman in the previous Parliament, always getting bombarded by these articles and books and so on, and having this faint sense of disappointment from Andrew that we'd never quite read all of them and been able to see all the technical points that he had put forward in them. The problem is over the summer, as you just heard, it was just even more, so keeping up harder and harder. But one of the things that I've always looked upon from the point of view of the House of Commons team is very important, is strengthening the links between when we're in London and our colleagues who are in Brussels. We are all in the same party, but sometimes I get the sense that we act in little different redoubts and don't talk enough to each other. And I think, and I take responsibility for this now, that the House of Commons parliamentary party has a major part to play in improving those relations. So one of the first visits that I made after I was asked by Ming to succeed him as Foreign Affairs spokesman for the party was to go to Brussels and meet with colleagues there, and a very invigorating evening's debate we had. It's interesting to see that there's a range of opinion amongst our MEP colleagues, just as there is amongst our House of Commons colleagues. But I certainly came away at the end with a lot of new ideas, a lot of updates and awareness of the thinking, and a lot of effort that people like Andrew and others are putting in week in, week out, month in, month out, in Brussels, trying to influence this debate, which is so important, not just in Brussels, but to all of us, wherever we are in Britain or across the rest of Europe. Now, this party, I think we can be more open about this nowadays than we used to be, but I think there's perhaps more of a range of views about Europe than there has been in the past. And a range of views is good for debate, and I think it's important for us that we have a good, constructive debate. So long as we retain our talent for coming together on the big issues when they confront us, then I don't think we've anything to worry about. And what was very important when we approached the Constitution the first time round was the way in which, although we had different views of the tactics and the strategy, we did all come together in agreeing that what was being proposed was so significant that we ought, in the spirit of what we'd argued about the Maastricht Treaty and about the Euro, we ought to call for a referendum on that. Now, we've seen what has happened in other parts of Europe since, and as Andrew's already referred to, the French and Dutch. Now, I had somebody correcting, is it referenda or referendums? You can hear whatever you wish me to have said at that particular point. The issue now has become that, and Andrew is one constantly reminding me about this, is that politicians fixed in Britain, not British politicians, but those of us who earn our pay flying up and down the country or taking the train, or environmentally friendly ways of doing it, between our different constituencies and the House of Commons, take our eye off the ball and don't necessarily always pay enough attention to what is going on with this. But thankfully, there is quite a lot going on, as we've heard. There's an awful lot of it which is highly technical, procedural, and there are a lot of political strategies being developed, as again Andrew referred to, in France, as they position themselves for the presidential elections next year. And it's not just the French who are, to some extent, guilty of cherry-picking which bits of the Constitution they think they might now wish to save and put forward as the best way of preserving the momentum of more efficient, better government in Europe. There's a huge task to do, not just a technical one, there's a huge political task as well. And this is where sometimes, I must face up to it, there is a difference of opinion between myself and Andrew and some of his colleagues about the ability of us to deliver a constitution, however much it is reformatted over the next few years. And I go back to my constituency base as my starting point for that. I have a constituency called now Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, easily confused with David Steele's first constituency of Roxburgh, Selkirk and Peebles, or Archie Kirkwood's of Roxburgh and Berwickshire, and nothing like the one I used to have, which is Tweeddale, Ettrick and Lauderdale, although 2/3 of it's the same. My claim to fame, and pay attention because you'll never have heard anybody else make this, is that I have actually represented every last square inch of the borders, which is more than David Steele ever managed, thanks to the Boundary Commission rather than anything else. But in that course of 10 years nearly that I've been in the Commons, I've never dealt with people across a broad range of towns and villages in an area which, although it looks quite compact, it's got quite a diverse range of views. And my sense has been over that period that the argument for Europe is getting harder to make. That makes me no less reluctant to make it, but I do recognise that we're having to refashion, redraw the arguments so that we are making Europe relevant to people on a day-by-day basis. Now, we have a lot to be thankful for in the borders when it comes to Europe. The structural funds regime has been absolutely crucial to helping us to restructure our economy over the past decade, as our traditional industries and textiles and the like have been under threat, as our farmers have had to come to terms with an increasingly global marketplace for their goods and the environmental consequences of what they're having to do under the cap. Equally, whenever the American trade response to the banana war, which I think more people just know about the banana war than any other gathering in the world, but under that trade war, the targeting by America of luxury goods in Europe meant that the cashmere sweaters and cardigans, which we manufacture in the borders, were going to be at the top of the hit list for the crippling sanctions that would overnight have wiped out the jobs of many of the people in my part of the world. And to my mind, the fact that we had a European Commission that was arguing on behalf of the whole of Europe and negotiating on all of our behalves gave us an extra degree of strength, which a contest in trade terms between Britain and the United States would have been a KO before we'd started. So that there, I think, there are a number of tangible ways in which I can argue to my constituents, and I've just touched the surface. You'll have 100 other examples that you can mention yourself. Europe is good, Europe is important, and so forth. And yet, there is a mood that things are getting more difficult, that Europe's always intervening and all this. We know all the cliches. It is my judgment that's just harder now than it was. And therefore, in that context, when things are changing so fast, when some of the kind of anti-globalization arguments that did for the Constitution probably more effective than anything else in France are finding currency in my part of the world, in that context, we've got to be very careful about what we come forward with and what we try to show to people.